Welcome to the InsideEVs live stream, where we are going to talk autonomous driving and XPeng motors today. Now we have a special guest coming all the way from China. He's Mark Andrews. He's a freelance journalist who participated in last week's cross-country or 2,300-mile trip where XPeng had about 15 of their P7 sedans, all-electric sedans, drive from Nanjing, China to Beijing on navigation-guided pilot, which is XPeng's version of, let's say, Tesla's Autopilot. It's their advanced driver assist systems. We would have loved to have gone over there ourselves, but due to the coronavirus, we got this next best thing, which is Mark Andrews. Mark and I have gotten to know each other when I visited XPeng last year in China. He was one of the local journalists that was invited to the events. So now whenever we need something done over there, I reach out to Mark and he's happy to assist. Thanks for joining us, Mark. And I will like to thank you additionally because it's 3 in the morning in China right now, and Mark has stayed up and agreed to do this for us. So you're a champ. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you.
So listen, Mark just participated in this drive. Now, he didn't participate in every day. What happened was XPeng set up an 8-day event where each day they drove somewhere between 300 and say 450 kilometers. They had different members of the media. They also had electric vehicle enthusiasts participate, and they let them drive the vehicles from city to city over an 8-day period. And then they aggregated all the data to see how many interventions were going to be needed with driving through tunnels, highway lane changing, highway exiting and entering. And they put all that data together, which we just got today, and we're going to show you shortly. But my first question to Mark is going to be, hey, so what did you think about this? Were you impressed with navigation guided pilot? Did it disappoint? Give us a little bit of an overview of how you feel the system works.
I thought it worked very well, actually. Yes, it's not exactly my first experience with NGP because I did get to see the beta version in January. But this was the first time with a production version of NGP. And yes, it worked very well, as I think we're going to see later on.
Okay, and later on that Mark is referring to is we're going to have a little discussion right now about the system, but then we're going to jump to a video that's about 15 minutes long where Mark recorded his drive on the day that he drove it and does a little overview, explains the system, shows how some of the features were working. Maybe we'll talk about what didn't work, and we'll go on from there. So that's going to come up next. But for now, I'd like to show a quick overview of how the system worked for the fleet of XPeng vehicles. XPeng provided us with this graphic that shows how the system performed over the course of the 8 days. Now, if you take a look at the bottom, now this was 3,000 plus kilometers. It was actually about 3,600 kilometers. You look at the consolidated matrix. It only need the fleet of these are all the vehicles combined only needed to driver intervention about 0.71 times per 100 kilometers. Now that would be slightly more than 1 human intervention per 100 miles, if my math is correct. And the average distance driven on navigation guided pilot per car was almost 3,000 kilometers. So it wasn't the entire trip because the NGP can't function on all the roads. It needs to be on the highly precise mapped roads, which encompass most of China's highways, and it's starting to have be covered in some of the cities, which Mark's going to talk about a little bit later while he's driving. And you can see there that the system had 94.41% success rate when changing lanes and overtaking. It had a 92.76% success rate entering and exiting highway ramps and going through tunnels, which is kind of unique to China. China has a lot of tunnels because of the topography of the country. It had almost a 95% success rate going through tunnels. Now, when we talk about success rates, it doesn't mean that 5% of the time the vehicle crashed. What it means is, 5% of the times the drivers had to intervene and say take control of the vehicle. Now, the fact is that these vehicles were being piloted by members of the media and auto and electric vehicle enthusiasts. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they had to take over at that time. It could have been a situation where they got a little nervous and they just took over, even though the car could have performed the task. Now, I drive a Tesla Model 3, and that happens to me on occasion. I'll be on autopilot, and it'll just be, it seems like I'm getting a little bit too close to that car next to me, or we're coming up to a turn and I'm not really pleased with how the vehicle's centered in the lane. So I just take over, even though the vehicle, chances are, would have been able to handle that maneuver with no problem. So when you take a look at those numbers there, 94%, 92%, almost 95%, the vehicle probably would have had an even higher success rate if the drivers would have just let the vehicle perform the task. So that's important to note. And we also got these statistics where we see the daily trip, where each day, you could take a look up there now, we have the 8 days on the side, March 19th through the 26th, and it shows where the route was from what city to what city and how many vehicles were involved in the drive. You could see how many kilometers were covered and then the human intervention per 100 kilometers. Now you'll notice in the middle, the 3 routes that we took in the middle, seems like it was a little bit higher than the other routes. And there's probably reasons for that, but we're going to ask Mark about that later. Now, all of this information, I'm not going to harp on it here and take too long on this live cast. We're going to have this up on InsideEVs on a post that overviews what we talked about here today within a day or two. So you'll be able to take a look at this and maybe dissect the numbers a little bit more. So Mark, let me ask you a question. During your drive, was there anything that kind of stood out with you with the system? Like, was it smooth? Did it feel choppy when it was making lane changes? Was there any phantom braking events? That happens to me with my Tesla, where I'm driving down the highway and it might read a shadow and all of a sudden it slams on the brakes. Did you get anything like that that kind of stood out during your drive?
Okay, first of all, I did not experience any phantom braking. Certainly never experienced that. With smoothness, yes, I generally felt that lane changing was quite smooth. My only criticism might be that what I feel is when it changes lanes, I don't know quite how in the US you're taught to drive, but in the UK it's mirror signal maneuver always. And that's very much the mantra. Now, I feel with NGP, it's signal, sensor signal maneuver. So it senses that it can make the maneuver, it signals, and then it maneuvers. Now, when it's changing lanes, it will go into the other lane and then speed up. It doesn't speed up whilst it's going into the lane, which is what I would do when I would actually be making the maneuver were I doing it myself.
Okay. And how did it handle the highway exits and entrances? Did you in your course, were there any of those where it navigated those without intervention?
We did one, which we'll actually see later on, where we went from one highway to another. And it's actually quite interesting. I think we'll leave that to the video a little bit. One thing I think is very important to mention is that it goes very much what the speed limit is. It's a very cautious and respectful driver. And I think we'll see that in the video.
Okay, so the autopilot on Tesla, and I hate to keep going back to that, but that's what I have experience with here in the U.S. It will automatically go on the speed that you turn it on. When you turn it on, even if you were going faster than the speed limit, it would automatically set the speed to that speed limit. And on some roads, it maximizes it. It only allows you to go 5 miles an hour faster than the speed limit if they're secondary roads. But on the highways, you can go much faster. Is there a way that you can set the system to allow you to exceed the speed limit, or does NGP limit you to do the speed limit?
As far as I know, there is absolutely no way you can do that with NGP. NGP will only go to the speed limit, to my knowledge, anyway. Unless there's something buried in a setting somewhere in the system which you can override it, as far as I know, it's not possible. And in fact, it goes slightly under the speed limit. So, for example, if it's saying 120 is the speed limit, it'll go usually around about 119.
Okay, cool. I see we have a quick question here. Question, all the kilometers driven are on highways only, correct? No, that's not correct. You're going to see that later. Mostly highways. You're going to see that. And now Steve Cass is asking us, when will XPeng come to the US? Steve, we don't know exactly when. XPeng hasn't announced any of the plans. They are in certain markets in Europe now, which leads us to believe that they will be coming to the US at some point. But as of now, they haven't given us any concrete answers on that. And I've asked. So as soon as they make that decision, you'll know on InsideEVs. Okay, I have another quick question from Flavio. So what are the main differences with Tesla's Autopilot? Flavio, the problem we have really comparing that is I have a lot of experience with Tesla's Autopilot, but not really any experience with NGP. And Mark is the opposite. He's been driven the NGP a bunch of times, but he really hasn't driven Tesla's Autopilot much. Once or twice he did a car. So we really need to get, what needs to happen is I need to get over to China as soon as we can travel again and really take it out and do a real good comparison. So I feel if we give you what are the comparisons now without really having someone that spent a lot of time in both, I think it'll just be like, sugarcoating it, not giving you the real answers. Yeah, and then we have another good to be cautious, safety first. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to watch the video. We have a video, it's about 15 minutes long, of Mark driving the car in China. And then when the video's over, we're going to take about 10 minutes to answer a whole bunch of questions. So during the video, feel free to post your questions up there. We're going to get to as many as we can.
The car you see behind me is the XPeng P7, and we're here in Nanjing to take part in a journey from the company's headquarters in Guangzhou to China's capital, Beijing. A distance of 3,675 kilometers, about 2,285 miles, it largely shadows the country's eastern seaboard from south to north. What's special about this road trip? Well, it's the longest autonomous driving expedition of mass-produced cars in China. While it's a relay, it's no race. Success rides on how well the autonomous driving systems of the dozen or so P7s taking part performs. All use the XPILOT 3.0 system. We'll be using navigation-guided pilot, referred to as NGP, autonomous driving software, to drive us on the highway to Huai'an. So we're now actually in a tunnel and we've just engaged NGP. And we're actually in the center of Nanjing right now. We haven't even got onto the highway. So NGP is able to operate in some situations where it's actually in the city, and this is one of them. It isn't just a highway system. If you notice, actually at the moment we've got the mapping display which is showing what NGP is actually looking at for its driving. And so we've got a 3D kind of rendering of the situation of the traffic. Okay, and the car just cut in there and it automatically braked, which is good. And it's still in control at the moment. Another car's about to cut in, and yep, we've braked again, good, okay. And I think we're about to get cut off one more time. Okay, and it's braking, yep. Okay. What's actually noticeable is it's actually quite cautious. So with a lot of drivers, they might have been trying to keep the lane more and been a bit more aggressive about trying to stop the other cars cutting in, whereas this actually just let them cut in. More so than probably I would have done. I would have tried to guard my lane more. So we're still under NGP right now. As I said, we are still in the center of Nanjing, going through another tunnel right now. So this is actually quite interesting. I wasn't sure whether we'd actually get to see NGP operating in the city. And sure enough, we actually are. Whilst NGP, due to the high precision mapping, covers somewhere in the region of 90 or 95% of the highways in China, it doesn't cover all cities by any means, and certainly not all city roads, but it does cover some, and certainly in the bigger cities, and Nanjing is
Mark,
one of the bigger cities. In fact, Nanjing...
Can you hear me? So one of the questions I have for you is earlier when you were cutting in and all those cars kept cutting in front of you, that seemed like it might be, if you were driving it yourself, you would definitely want to be a little bit more aggressive. What was going on in that situation there?
Yes, that's a good question. I think actually, now having watched the video again, I would have thought it would have been better to be in another lane, because we did not have to go off at that stage. We were going essentially from one tunnel to another. And we could have been in another lane where we wouldn't have had the problem with the cars trying to merge into that lane.
Okay. That makes sense.
NGP will work in areas where there is high precision mapping, which currently is most highways in China, or at least most sections of it, and some controlled inner city roads, such as sort of expressways within a city. As such, it is a level 3 system. Okay, we've just gone into NGP. And now the car is driving itself. It's sensing the speed. What is the speed limit here? 100. Okay, it's showing 100 here. We're going 81 at the moment. Now we've got a slow-moving truck. Let's see if it's going to overtake or not. There's a car fast approaching behind. Is it going to make the maneuver or not? Oh, now we go. Now we go. So off we go. Still, though, we're only going around about 80, and the speed limit is 100, although the traffic, quite honestly, up ahead is not moving significantly faster. There is, in the outside lane, about 3 cars up, there's a car going around about the same speed as us, which is actually slowing everything down. Okay, we're picking up speed now. Okay, we're going into the outside lane. Off we go. Here we go. Yep. Yeah, and now we are picking up speed, so up to 90.
So unfortunately, the video seems like it is slowed down. We have audio, but we're
As
going to
I
see if
said,
we can
the
get
speed
the
limit is
video to catch
100.
up.
Generally, NGP goes just a fraction below the actual speed limit. So speed limit being 100, so it's chosen 99. Okay, it's just warned me that I've actually need to do some input onto the steering wheel. I did actually have my hands on the wheel, but it doesn't necessarily sense that my hands are on the wheel. That's actually one thing that the system could do a little bit better at, sensing whether the hands are actually on the wheel. Every now and then you have to jiggle it a little bit just to make sure it realizes you actually have got your hands on the wheel.
So
the car's just correctly realized that the speed limit has changed to 80.
The system operates like the Tesla does, where there's a torque sensor on the steering wheel, right? It doesn't monitor the driver, and then if you look like you're not attentive, it shuts off NGP. It basically works with a torque sensor on the steering wheel.
That seems to be the case, yes. There doesn't seem to be anything else.
A toll gate in one moment. Okay, just reminding me that I need to jiggle the wheel a bit. We're coming up to a toll gate in about 700 meters.
Okay.
Off NGP any moment. Yeah, it's saying that it's going to kick me off in 175 meters, 50 meters. Okay, and we transitioned there. So now I've taken over. we need to go to the right, do we? Okay. We're just exiting a surface area and we're going to join the highway again. And we're going up the ramp. Okay, NGP is not enabled yet as far as I can see. Okay, now it's saying that NGP can take over, so I'm just going to activate NGP by pressing this down twice. So here goes. So NGP is now activated, it's gone blue, and okay, it's overtaking right now. So we've just done a lane change, and I think we might be about to make another lane change. No, not yet. Oh yeah, here we go. Here it goes into the other lane. So it's trying to optimize the lanes based on the speed that cars around it are going. Right now the speed limit is 100 and we are going at 88. Okay, we're going into the middle lane now. The cars in the outside lane are actually going quite slowly, so I think it's going to try and overtake the cars from the middle lane. So we're overtaking a slower moving car that's in the outside lane. And it's slowing down because we actually got a slower vehicle in front of us now. Is it going to go? Yes, here it goes. Okay, we're going into the outside lane again.
So Mark, it's doing that now to what? To optimize the speed? It changes the lane to try to go as fast as it can?
Yes, but that white car was causing a problem in that actually it wasn't going the speed limit. We had already been behind it. We tried to go into the middle lane to overtake, but because there was a truck in the middle lane, we then had to slow down. We ended up going back behind the white car.
Okay, gotcha.
You'll also notice on the map that it distinguishes between cars and trucks. So of course the trucks are the larger, blockier icons rather than the cars. Just now a car cut in front of us and it braked quite severely. Well, not actually that severely, but it broke to actually give a safe distance between us and the car in front. So we're actually slowing down quite significantly to go to change highways. So the speed limit way up ahead I can see is 60, and it's actually already at 60. In fact, the car behind us got fed up with us and has just overtaken us. And we've got a warning of obstacles there, which is spotted.
So right here, we're actually changing from one highway to another. And if you look, all the cars are actually overtaking us because we are going the speed limit, whereas they aren't.
One thing to notice is actually we are going the speed limit. I know it may look like a lot of cars are overtaking us. They're actually all speeding. And what this car does with the NGP system is that it really goes at the speed limit, which not all people obey by any means in China. But also, what is significant is that it tries to maximize its speed, which a lot of people don't do in China as well. So you'll often get the case where maybe the speed limit is 100 or 120, and people are wandering around on the outside lane at 80 or something like that. Whereas this car will try to actually, well, the NGP system, I should say, rather than the car, will try to maximize the speed that it can safely under the conditions.
Based on that comment just now, it
So,
doesn't go below the speed limit.
Yeah, so it's just gone to 120. So we've just gone from 80 to 120. We're now speeding up. We're not, because actually a car nearly cut in front of us. So we're just, now it's going to speed up again. Yeah, so we're building up speed again right now. So we're going up to 90, in fact over 90. And we're now at 119. So the speed limit's 120, we're just going 1 kilometer below it. While a lot of viewers are probably familiar with NIO, they may not be so familiar with XPeng. XPeng, like NIO, is one of the new breed of startup EV companies in China. The company currently has 2 production models, the G3, a small crossover, and the P7 that is driving us right now, a sports sedan. There will be a 3rd model going on sale by the end of the year, likely to be called the P5. We expect it may well be unveiled at the Shanghai Auto Show in April. Although NIO currently sells more cars, XPeng has had bigger increases by percentage in recent months and is rapidly catching up. Last year, XPeng sold 27,041 cars and was already on sale in Norway. Many people see NIO as the Chinese Tesla competitors. In some ways, this is true. However, NIO only sells SUVs, and they're at a higher price point than the Model 3 and Model Y. XPeng, on the other hand, are positioning themselves as a technology company, and this is really what this marathon relay race is all about. Another difference between XPeng and NIO is the company's respective approaches to advanced driver assist systems, ADAS. Like Tesla, XPeng develops all the systems in-house, whereas NIO subcontracts it out to a third party. This means that XPeng can undertake frequent OTAs, updating new services, whereas NIO might have to wait for larger updates and less frequent ones. And here we are at our destination in Huai'an. As you can see, it's a glorious day. And in many ways, our experience today with NGP has been glorious in itself. We started off earlier in Nanjing. Now, I wasn't sure at that time whether we'd be able to demonstrate any NGP driving on the city roads in Nanjing, because some city roads are covered by NGP, and it turned out, in fact, we were able to. There were some enclosed roads where we were able to demonstrate NGP within the city itself. Then, on the highway, most of our route was covered by NGP. We experienced different scenarios. We showed the system overtaking automatically. We showed it sensing the speed limit, so changing the speed accordingly to what the speed limit was. We saw avoidance of objects. We saw the transitions between NGP and my own driving, both where it ran out of high precision mapped highway, or when we were joining or exiting highway sections. We also saw where there were obstacles on the road and how it dealt with those. Earlier this year, I drove the beta version on the roads around Guangzhou. This is the production version, which since the end of January has been available to all customers who have the XPILOT 3.0 hardware fitted to their P7s. Is there a difference? Well, maybe it's not a major difference, but the system does seem a little bit smoother. Maybe it's just my own experience with the system and that I'm now more used to it, but I do feel it is a smoother system. I hope you've enjoyed our video today.
All right, so we're going to jump back into a session now where we try to field a bunch of questions. That was cool watching that, Mark. I wish I was over there with you to participate. All right, Mark, why don't you grab some questions?
Right, I noticed it says, how does it see traffic behind the car? So the car is surrounded by sensors. So you've got what is it? I think about 13, 14 cameras. You've got 12 ultrasonic sensors, and you've got 5 millimeter wavelength radars. So it's got a sensor suite, which is basically building up a picture around the car. So that's essentially how it's seeing cars behind.
Right. Okay, I'm going to grab this one. Can we say this is closest to Super Cruise? Because I'm assuming Mark hasn't driven a vehicle with Super Cruise yet, and I have. I was able to drive the 2022 Bolt EUV with Super Cruise. And I would say, yeah, it's similar. One of the things that it's similar is that it requires the high precision mapping to operate. And when I drove the Bolt EUV here in New Jersey, the stretch of highway that we were driving on, unfortunately, there were patches that were covered and patches that weren't. So it was kind of like we had to wait until we could activate Super Cruise. Then we activated it, and then one of the things I noticed was when the highway split, like if there was two ways you can go, about a half a mile ahead of time, Super Cruise would deactivate. It didn't want to deal with the road splitting, even if you were staying on the main road. So, without driving NGP, it's hard for me to compare, but I think that the philosophy and the hardware behind them are going in the same direction, more so than what Tesla's doing with their Autopilot. And does it have Lidar? This system on the P7 that Mark drove does not have Lidar, but it's expected that the next vehicle that Mark was talking about, the P5, which we believe it's going to be called, that's going to be introduced this year, is supposed to have Lidar. And I have the company here from Livox. They're stating that Livox is the Lidar provider. They already have a contract with them. So that is the direction that XPeng is moving in. 14 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors, 5 millimeter wave radars, and Lidar systems. So they're looking for complete redundancy, which you're going to hear a little bit later, because we're going to show an interview I had with Dr. XinZhou Wu, who is the Vice President of Autonomous Driving for XPeng. We're going to show that in about 7 or 8 minutes. Mark, why don't you grab a couple?
No, it isn't LiDAR based. So it's mapped. So NGP is dependent on high precision mapping. Although by the sounds is a lot more accurate than Super Cruise that Tom was just talking about. Although there were sections of the highway where it was not covered.
Yeah, Mark, what percentage of the highways in China are covered with these high precision mappings?
My understanding is it's somewhere between 90 and 95%. Obviously, different highways have different percentage of mapping. I understood that, so I drove the car from Nanjing to Huai'an, but it was part of the Nanjing to Qingdao route for that day. So my understanding for that route, for the whole distance to Qingdao, 80% was covered by NGP available area. However, in my experience with the route to Huai'an, I think it was much higher. I think we drove probably around about 95% of the route was covered by a route that NGP could handle. Because as we saw in the video, I was quite surprised that even in the center of Nanjing, going through that kind of controlled road, which was a tunnel, NGP was available to us.
Excellent. So our friends at Out of Spec Reviews have asked a question, and with this they maybe just joined in because we did answer this a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. Did you experience any phantom braking situations, or was the car relatively smooth while cruising, Mark?
I have never experienced phantom braking with NGP, either in my experience just recently or with the beta version in Guangzhou.
Very good. So what advantages will LiDAR bring to the car? Now, I don't know if I know I'm not a LiDAR engineer, and I don't know if Mark is either. I'm going to say redundancy, just to have another system checking to make sure that there's no problems, and that's the whole basis of really having the the radar and the lidar. I think a lot of people would agree that it's possible to build a completely autonomous driving system with cameras. At least some people believe that. But they want the radar and the lidar for redundant systems, so that just in case the cameras miss something, that will catch it. That's my belief, at least.
Okay, there was one situation that I'll add to that, which I actually experienced whilst driving just a few days ago. So at one section, I was actually filming and talking to the camera at the time, but I was still trying to keep a reasonable eye on the road. And we were cruising along in the outside lane, and suddenly I noticed there was a dog running around the central reservation. And the system had no way of really picking up that dog. It didn't realize there was a dog there. Actually, I made sure that we were safe. I didn't intervene because the dog didn't do anything. It was just still wandering around the central reservation. But I think had we had LiDAR fitted, it would have probably picked the dog up, hopefully, anyway.
Okay. So here's another familiar name, the EV News Daily, which is an awesome podcast in itself. How does the driver monitoring work? Is it just wheel torque sensor or driver facing camera also?
As far as I know, it's just wheel torque sensor.
Yeah, I think that's something that XPeng is going to be adding, but I don't know if it's currently in use in the vehicle. But I tell you what, we will find out, and when I do a follow-up article on InsideEVs, I'll make sure that I explain if it's just the torque sensor at this moment or if it also has the driver monitoring. And Adrian has said that this is impressive tech. We think it is, Adrian, and that's why we're talking about it here today. One of the cool things that we're doing today is talking about, not just electric cars, which, everybody, a lot of people are very excited with this electric evolution or revolution where we're kind of transitioning to electrical powered vehicles. But also that we're getting this new wave of technology, this autonomous driving technology, and it's happening at the same time. So I think people are kind of just saying that, EVs and autonomous vehicles just go together. Whereas, we could have these EVs on these autonomous driving features on, internal combustion engine vehicles, but the two technologies seem to be taking off at the same time. So people are just lumping them together. But it's a great time to be talking about cars because this is what's going on in the automobile industry right now is just amazing compared to what's happened over the last 100 years. So we have another question from Addis-Speckle. Yeah, please do.
Okay, as far as I know, there is absolutely no way you can alter the style of driving. What I have noticed in my earlier test with in Guangzhou, I drove a Tesla on the same route. I found the Tesla's basically overtaking and lane changing was more aggressive than the Exponent system.
Okay. What kind of situations did the system disengage most often? That's one that I was going to ask you, so we got it here. Did it disengage often, first of all?
Not really, no. And I think the main situation where it disengaged was basically it ran out of high precision mapping. So areas where it ran out of mapping, it would warn you. Particularly coming up to toll gates. Usually, I think we actually saw that in the video. So there was a sort of countdown going to the toll gate, and it would actually show when the NGP was going to cut out and I needed to take over. I think there was one situation where I was driving along the highway and it did just suddenly cut out. It may well have warned me. I was actually talking on camera at the time, so I may have missed some sort of cue to say that it was going to cut out.
Okay, cool. So Steve wants to know how often does the map update? In San Francisco, certain roads have changed, blocked off, directing traffic to turn left. So his Tesla doesn't seem to be updating quickly enough. I don't know if Mark's going to be able to answer that. I can't either, but that's one of the things that I will ask XPeng. Maybe Mark does know the answer. I know in China, in general, the country seems to be really focusing on getting all of the roads mapped and they might have a more consistent operation of updating the data than we do here in the U.S. But that's just speculation. Mark, do you know anything about that? How frequently they update?
I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that generally people, for example, will use their mobile phones rather than in-car navigation because simply the mobile phone mapping systems tend to be more up to date. But I think what XPeng is using is similar kind of technology, so it should be fairly up to date. But again, as Tom just said, that's something to actually really check with XPeng experts.
Mm-hmm. And so another question, SF here, is how long has this been in development? XPeng's a relatively new car company. They've only been around for 3 or 4 years. So, they quite possibly started working on this, a year or two before we heard about them when they were kind of in, dark mode as a company, but not long. XPeng hasn't been around that long. They first started selling cars, I think, was it 2019, Mark? I think that's when the G3 first launched. So they've only been selling cars for a couple of years.
2018, 2019.
And they've really caught up to everybody and even surpassed everybody. This XPeng has the most advanced driver assistance system in China right now. They've kind of come out of nowhere in the last couple of years and just developed this system, and they've kind of passed everybody else by. So James wants to know, with the reliance on high precision mapping, is this going to slow down expansion into Europe and U.S. markets? That's a really good question, James. And it could. It absolutely could. Because the system's going to rely on that, and it can only be as good as the mapping is. I know this is happening in Europe and the U.S. now. They're doing these high precision mapping, so the system might not function quite as well if they do bring the car here as it does in China. Now that's something that we're going to talk about next. We're actually going to start that in about a minute. I have an interview with Dr. XinZhou Wu, who's the vice president of autonomous driving for XPeng. So we're going to show a video that I have where I interviewed him. I only asked him 2 or 3 questions, and then we're going to jump back and finish up with about another 10 minutes of answering questions. So let's just grab another 2 more questions. We'll jump to the interview that I have with Dr. Wu, and then we'll come back and do this again and answer maybe 10 minutes more of questions. Mark, want to grab this one?
I think this is actually a really good question from AutoShing77 about being more relaxed. And yes, definitely, actually. I was more relaxed with NGP because I was actually doing a lot of filming. I was talking to camera, and I could relax, and I wasn't having to monitor the steering so much. Obviously, you do have to put in some inputs, and you can't completely take your attention off the road. But it would have been quite difficult to do some of the filming that we did, I think, without having the NGP system.
Very good. Okay, let's jump over to the interview that I did with Dr. Wu. It's about 15 minutes long. And as I said, Mark and I will be waiting. We'll come back. We'll do this again, do maybe 10 more minutes or so, try to answer as many questions as we can. To introduce Dr. XinZhou Wu, who is the Vice President of Autonomous Driving at XPeng Motors. Thanks for coming on the webcast, Dr. Wu.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, XPeng is undertaking this incredibly ambitious event now, driving 3,600 kilometers on NGP, which is, probably the longest any autonomous driving event has taken effect, especially when you consider it's not just one vehicle, it's a fleet of production vehicles. These aren't pilot test vehicles. So this is super interesting and something that our followers here on InsideEVs are really interested in. So, we're going to talk to you a little bit about the technology in the vehicles and why XPeng positions themselves as a leader in this technology. Particularly, one of the things I find really interesting is the software. XPeng is developing all of its software in-house. Now, many other car manufacturers, a lot of your competitors go to outside third parties like Mobileye, for instance, but you've taken it upon yourself to develop all of your software in-house. Why is that so important?
Sure. XPeng Motors is a smart EV company, and actually we see ourselves, the key differentiator for our company against our competitors is really the smart part. So probably not many people know this. Actually, right after the company is founded, the vision is really try to develop the autonomous driving technology in-house. So right after actually, the company was founded probably 5, 6 years ago. We started to put people on, developing the, automated parking system, which was basically got into production essentially in our first vehicle model G3. And then, right now, obviously, we are working pretty hard on NGP, which was released to customer 3 months ago, and it has gained pretty good, I think, customer recognition and market attraction at this point. The other reason is that because we want to make sure we have a leading position in autonomous driving. Being able to develop the technology fully in-house has a lot of advantage. Because we can, close the loop within the company. We can run much faster, and we can utilize the basically data we can collect from our, customer fleet much more efficiently. So all these advantages basically, give us an edge if we have the technology fully in-house. And the other part is also important, which is the localization part, which we'll, talk a little bit more about this as well, because the software we develop are for the China market. If we adopt a technology from a, let's say, international big tier ones like Mobileye, much of their solutions are not really well tailored to fit into the Chinese road condition and Chinese driving kind of habits. So it's very, very important for us to be able to basically tune the software ourselves. And that also basically says we pretty much have to build the technology in-house.
That makes a lot of sense. And you teed up a great question. Why is Chinese roads, or why are Chinese roads so challenging? I've heard this from quite a number of OEMs that it's, you can't develop autonomous driving for the US or Europe and then just take it and put it into China. There's a lot of different challenges. It won't work as well. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. To be fair, it's just different. It's not necessarily more challenging as compared to, crowded European cities or US cities. But the Chinese road condition, number one, is they are very different. For example, the lane lines. The lane lines, basically, the lane line types in China, I think probably has the most types as compared to anywhere else in in the world. So being able to recognize these different kind of lane types and being able to understand the semantic meanings of this lane lines are very important. Actually, are probably the first thing you need to do correctly, basically, to enable autonomous driving. And also, basically in China, there's one thing which is very particular. It's there's the law enforcement on the road through security cameras is much more strict. There's a lot of the electronic, basically eyes. That's what we call them. And if you are trespassing, you are doing a lane change where you are not supposed to, then you get a ticket automatically. So like solid lane line change is a big no-no in China. So there's things get complicated very quickly because there's this fishbone lane lines, which means that you have to slow down. But it can be a combination between basically fishbone, which is slow down, and the solid. And also there can be difference on the left side, and you have a lane line essentially. On the left side it's dash, on the right side it's solid. On top of that you have fishbone. So there's many combinations you need to recognize, and you need to make sure you do not do lane change when you're not supposed to. You know, a international solution, if they're not trained on this kind of data, then you might not be able to recognize this kind of scenarios. Then basically you can get into the customer into trouble, especially when we are getting into higher level of you know, autonomous driving. The software is taking you you know, end to end, you know, on the highway. Essentially, it's doing you know, automatic lane change to avoid bad traffic, and based on navigation. All these are essential. So being able to do that correctly, it's absolutely critical. This is just one aspect of it, and the other one is probably you know, even on the localization side, which means position the vehicle accurately. The requirement in China is also quite different, because China is a very, actually many parts of the China, there's a lot of hills and mountains. As compared to in US, actually most of the cities are basically, you do not see like tunnels that often. But in China, like where I am right now in Guangzhou, like tunnels are everywhere. Being able to get through these tunnels without being interrupted, in the sense you still be engaged in NGP is very, very important. That's why we spend a lot of time to tune our localization solutions using GPS and using HD maps, so that we can actually navigate you know, very, very long tunnels without basically you know, have to quit the function. Actually, in comparison, you know, the company you mentioned, Tesla, basically, their solution right now, actually, they have to pretty much quit NOA, I think, right? It's, yeah, NOA, whenever they get into a tunnel. So this is quite a big difference. It's, you know, it's so being our capability enable customer to have less disruption when they have to deal with tunnels. And number three is also important, is the driving habits. In China road, basically, there's a lot of kind of different types of vehicles, probably have more varieties as compared to the US road. For example, tricycles and basically electric bikes. They're very, very common in China. And the food delivery personnel, they basically, they ride on these electric bikes, and they can appear anytime from anywhere around the vehicle. So
I know.
and also
I've driven in China. I know.
all right. And also the other thing is people do very aggressive cut-ins.
Yeah.
As if you're not there. So you know, actually in US I have you know, obviously I drive in both countries, but in US I think I would say the driving pattern is much more benign. So being able to handle aggressive cut-ins is definitely absolutely needed to develop the software you know, in China. So anyways, there's many different aspects you know, of how do you make the software right again for Chinese road conditions and Chinese customers. So so that's why, you know, localization or being able to do this tune the software work well you know, for in Chinese roads and Chinese environments are really, really important to you know, build a good product for the Chinese customers.
Okay. So that, and you actually teed up another question. You had mentioned just then that going through tunnels can be particularly challenging, and that, for instance, Tesla vehicles, who's you know, obviously a big competitor, the autopilot needs to quit quite often if it's entering through a tunnel. Now, Tesla just recently announced that they're going to be dropping the radar from their autonomous driving technology. Right now, it's a camera-based system with radar, and they're basically saying they don't even need the radar. It's going to be just cameras. Now, XPeng's taken that in a totally different direction. You're using Lidar, I think 5 high-precision millimeter wave radars. You've got 13 cameras. You're using, it seems like, everything
14.
that you could possibly put it. How many now?
14 cameras.
14. Okay, sorry. I thought 13. Yeah, I think you snuck one in on me there. You added one. But so, you know, you have got this huge suite of technology in there. You're not relying on one particular technology. Could you maybe explain why you think that's the right decision for XPeng to do?
Sure, I think there's a few different angles you can look at this. Number one is really about the complementary natures of the capabilities of different sensors. Camera is a wonderful sensor, and you can argue that human have eyes. They're kind of analogies to the cameras you use in the cars, right? If human can drive with eyes, supposedly cars can drive with cameras only. But the cameras essentially they have their if you look at the camera sensor, it's really a projection of 3D information into a 2D plane, right? And then basically the depth information is sort of lost in that process. You need to do a lot of advanced algorithms to be able to recover that depth or this 3D information from the camera sensory information. On the other hand, the sensory camera's advantage is basically the density of pixels or the information is much more as compared to order of magnitude actually higher than millimeter wave millimeter radar or basically or lidar actually, even when we compare to lidar. So you can derive very rich I would say semantic information about the objects using camera sensor. And that radar, on the other hand, the information is coarse, but it has a direct measurement of the 3D information, which is the depth. And also on top of that, which is also important, it also measures the speed of the object directly. That's in other words, in more technical terms, it's Doppler basically measurement. You come from the electromagnetic waves. And the LiDAR, it's also a light sensor, but because it's measuring the basically round trip time between the transmitting and the receiving of the light, then basically you can measure pretty much the depth information pretty easily. So with LiDAR, essentially it gives you a almost like a free 3D drivable space, which is quite easy to use when you have it. So essentially these three sensors, they are quite different and they have their strengths and weakness in different areas. Obviously, if you basically work hard on one of them, for example, camera, as Tesla is doing, you can when your algorithm gets stronger and stronger, you can basically derive the 3D world as well. But it takes a lot of effort, and also the performance. We still believe that a sensor fusion, which kind of approach, which kind of combine the kind of strengths of different sensors, is still a better approach and a more robust approach. So if you look at again a complicated, I would say basically driving scene, right? When you are trying to pass the intersection with a lot of basically the electric bikes, which can appear anytime around you, and people and even pets. So to be able to track these objects accurately, their position, their velocity, and even their acceleration, you would like to actually and also ensure the safety of both the driver and the objects around the vehicle. You want to have this kind of accuracy in your perception capability, and that comes from a good combination of all these sensors. That's at least the way we see it. And number two is also important, which is the redundancy nature of a higher level of autonomous driving. I do believe that in a matter of somewhere between 4 to 5 years, our software want to evolve to a higher level of basic automation, where a driver can get out of the loop at least for some time, essentially. When that will requires that you have a lot of redundancy in the system, including your sensing capabilities. So we believe that having all sensors in the vehicle right now, actually for P7, for our current vehicle model, we only have 360 radar and the camera dual coverage. But in the future, we will add basically LiDARs in our next vehicle model to the front sensing as well. When we have these multiple levels of sensor and coverage, we can achieve a much better redundancy. For example, in the worst scenario, there can be a flying paper, coming at you and cover your camera, right? Maybe for a few seconds, but you do not want your vehicle to lose control. So we, in a sensor fusion basically approach, even in this kind of scenarios, even driver is not paying attention and one of your sensors is getting compromised, you can still maintain the safety and operational, make the vehicle still operational in this kind of scenarios. This is essential to be able to get a high level of automation. That's at least the technical direction we are going. Obviously we, as many technical folks working in this area, we all have a lot of respect for what Tesla is trying to do, and we wish them all the best. But we do believe that at least to be able to, number one, basically to be able to develop technology in a very complex environment, like Chinese roads, and number two, to be able to achieve the high level of autonomy, basically to ensure redundancy, you would need multiple sensors to work seamlessly with each other.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. And listen, I want to thank you for coming on today. I know it's late in China now, so you stayed up late for this, and I really appreciate you doing that. Congratulations on this 3,600 kilometer successful, nearly cross-country drive on navigation guided pilot. It's really, when I first heard that XPeng was doing this, I said, well, this can go either way. If there's a lot of human intervention needed, if some of the journalists say, oh, it didn't perform well, it was kind of a risky move, but it seems like you guys pulled it off and very successfully. So congratulations on that. And again, thanks for coming on. I'm sure the InsideEVs followers are going to appreciate this.
All right. Thanks for having me again. Thanks, Tom.
So that was pretty informative. That was great to hear Dr. Wu's thoughts on this. And, nobody knows the autonomous driving in XPeng better than him. He's the Vice President of Autonomous Driving Technology. So why don't we jump back into the questions now and see where they take us. Okay, Bill B, will XPeng build its own dealer network? So that's an interesting question. We don't have a direct answer for that. I assume you mean for Europe and US. The way their business model is in Europe now, I'm pretty sure in Norway where they have a local distributor that's handling all of the car sales there. Maybe someone from Norway can chime in and tell us exactly how that's handled. But I haven't heard of any plans for them to build brick and mortar stores of XPeng stores of their own and do direct sales. But that's another question I can ask them. Maybe we'll get an answer. All right, Mark, why don't you grab this one?
Yeah, with the next question, I know in the Norway market the system does speak English, but it does not speak Norwegian.
I know the car that I drove, I got to drive a P7 here in the US, but not on the roads because it wasn't street legal yet. I got to drive it in a big parking lot, actually. That did not have, it was not updated with English language, so I was kind of trying to figure things out as it went along.
The P7 does not have English yet. Only the G3 for Norway market has English. The P7 will get English as far as I know, but not yet.
Yeah. Mark, why don't you grab this
about
one?
the road signs, as far as I know, it does not read road signs, but that is a question for XPeng.
Okay. If XPeng comes to the US, will they use Google Maps like Tesla, or will they develop their own? Steve, that really is a good question. It's something that I'm interested in knowing, but it's a little early for us to have that information. XPeng isn't even really talking about what if they'll come to the US. I've asked them on multiple occasions, and I've just kind of said, they've told me you're going to have to wait and see. So, we don't have a definitive time for when they're going to enter the US market, let alone what technology they're going to use when they get in there. But rest assured, we'll be on this on InsideEVs.
What I would say, though, regarding mapping, XPeng does not use their own mapping in China. They're using, I think it's Gaudo or something like that, the company's name. So they're going to be using some other company's high-precision mapping. Who it will be, I don't know.
Okay. The XPeng G3, it's going to have NGP. and when is be released to the oil cost? Mark's shaking his head that it's not going to have it.
It's not possible because the G3 does not have the what is important to know. NGP works on XPILOT 3.0. XPILOT 3.0 may sound like a software system, but it's actually a combination of hardware and software. The G3 does not have the hardware that is capable of running NGP. It has XPILOT 2.5, which some P7s do have, but it does not have the XPILOT 3.0.
Okay. Any more questions for us coming up here? Let's take a look. Camera.
Can I actually just make a comment whilst
Sure.
we're getting another question? What's actually quite funny, I don't know if anybody's seen it today, but there's quite a lot of things on the internet about Tesla in Vietnam today, where basically a Tesla has a meltdown with the traffic in Vietnam. And it's quite funny actually based on what Dr. Wu was saying in his speech about the different types of road users that you get in a lot of Asian countries and systems being able to cope with it or not being able to cope with it. And there was a prime example on the internet today with that.
Cool. Okay, well, we're getting close to the end here. Maybe we'll just grab one more question from Out of Spec Reviews, and then we'll wrap up because we've blown past the hour point here, Mark. Okay, so Mark, if you had the choice in China to drive long distance with Tesla Autopilot or XPeng NGP, which would you choose?
I don't know if you've seen my previous video with my experience with Autopilot. I think I better address something with that. So I got a lot of stick for this actually back in January when I did the initial test with the beta version of NGP. So I did the drive with NGP in the morning on one route and did the same drive with a Tesla Model 3 in the afternoon. Now, going into this experience, I had not driven either a P7 with NGP or, in fact, I had a slight experience with a Model 3 using its autopilot system the night before. So I actually had slightly more experience with the Tesla than I did with the XPeng. But I got kicked off Tesla's system because I did not realize what it was trying to tell me by a blue flashing screen. Because also my driving style is pretty much looking straight ahead or looking around me, around the roads, not so much on the instruments. And I find a little bit of a problem with, well, basically the middle screen with not having anything directly in front of me. It was flashing blue lights. I believe it actually said something in Chinese. My reading of Chinese is not particularly fast, and I don't really want to be looking down trying to read something. And it was telling me that I was about to be kicked off. I didn't realize that I was kicked off. XPeng, on the other hand, gives a red little picture of a steering wheel and will also tug the seat belt, which to me is a lot easier to realize I'm about to get kicked off and I need to make some input. So based on that, my experience, I would rather do the NGP, but maybe with more experience with Tesla system, maybe that wouldn't be the case. I also, though, do feel the NGP works probably better with the Chinese road systems than the Tesla system does. But
Yeah.
that is in the Chinese context with the Chinese roads, the high precision mapping.
Yeah, and that's to what Dr. Wu's point said earlier about, take for instance tunnels. The Tesla's autopilot really struggles with tunnels in China, and there's a lot of tunnels in China, and it just won't do them because all of a sudden it goes from being light out to dark, and it has difficulty with that. So that goes back to the conversation I had with Dr. Wu that it seems like XPeng is really building the system to function the best in China, at least to begin with, and then hopefully when they expand to more markets, they'll spend more time working on that. Whereas Tesla might be best suited for the US and then also very good in Europe, but China might be the third best market for it to operate in because it just there's different challenges, different road conditions there. That goes back to the conversation we had with Dr. Wu. So listen, we're up at about an hour, 10 minutes now. We're going to have to call this quits. Thank you for everybody for everybody who participated. Thank you, Mark, for staying up. It's now 4 a.m. Over in China. Just don't drink any more coffee and go to sleep. We appreciate you coming by. We hope to have you on a live stream again at some point in the future. And thanks for everybody that tuned in, asked your questions. This was a lot of fun, and I think we're going to be doing this again sometime soon. Take care, everyone.